welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something that's been making a lot of noise online, the Interactive Combat League, the ICL.
Right, this whole spectacle of metal and mayhem. It looks pretty wild.
It does, but that's kind of the core question, isn't it? We're diving in to figure out if these giant fighting robots are, actually real, or is it something else entirely?
Exactly. Are we looking at genuine tech or just, showmanship?
And for this, we're drawing on analysis from Gemini Nova and some really sharp observations from their creative partner, Jet.
Two good perspectives to try and get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so let's start where most people first saw this, that viral marketing in Detroit.
Oh yeah, the robot walking down the street? Zion, they called it.
That's the one. A human-sized robot, apparently controlled by the ICL founder, Art Cartwright, promoting this RoboWar event.
And people really went for it. You saw comparisons to RoboCop popping up.
Definitely. And Cartwright had this whole narrative about inspiring young people, getting them into robotics, which, sounds admirable.
It does. But almost immediately, Jet started pointing out some, let's say, inconsistencies. Things that made him skeptical about the giant robots.
Okay, so what were those first red flags for Jet?
Well, first off, what he called the tinfoil aesthetic. He looked at these supposed 8-foot-tall robots, claimed to be built in Detroit, and basically said they looked less like advanced machines and more like, people walking on stilts wrapped in foil.
Huh. Not exactly cutting-edge engineering, then.
Not visually, according to Jet. And then there were the effects in the promo videos.
The weapons fire?
Yeah, the muzzle flares, the sparks flying off. Jet was pretty convinced those were digital additions, added in post-production.
Which raises questions, right? Like, are giant robots really firing live rounds in public spaces? Seems unlikely. And maybe unsafe.
Extremely unlikely. And yeah, the safety aspect is huge. But Jet's biggest point, maybe, was what he called the unnecessary deception. Meaning, why fake it? Real robot combat, even with large-ish bots, is actually happening. He mentioned piloting a fighting robot remotely himself through ultimate fighting bots.
So the technology exists in some form already.
Exactly. So why stage it like this if you don't have to? It felt off to him.
Interesting. And does the AI analysis, Gemini Nova's perspective, line up with that skepticism?
It really does, yeah. Gemini Nova noted the visuals felt more theatrical than truly mechanical, especially for the big robots.
So
their movements just didn't seem to have the right weight or, the kind of deliberate, maybe slightly clunky precision you expect from actual giant machinery in combat.
Right. It lacked that heft. That actually reminds Gemini Nova of an older show.
Oh, which one?
That sci-fi show, Robot Combat League, from maybe 10 years ago. They had real 8-foot, 1,000-pound robots fighting.
I remember that, yeah. They were definitely real machines.
They were. But the creator openly admitted they added pyrotechnics, explosions, and sparks for visual excitement. Gemini Nova sees the ICL as maybe taking that idea, but perhaps leaning much more into the spectacle, maybe even at the expense of the engineering reality.
So it's like they learned from that, but maybe took the wrong lesson, focused more on the flash.
Potentially.
Okay.
And it creates this weird contrast, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, you have the street marketing using that smaller Unitree G1 robot, which looks like a real off-the-shelf quadruped bot we see in tech demos.
Okay, yeah, that lends some credibility, makes it seem grounded in real tech.
Exactly. But then the main event, the giant fighters, they look more like, as Jet put it, costumes than combatants.
So a bit of a bait and switch, maybe. Using a real small bot to sell potentially fake big ones.
It raises that question. So the issue isn't really whether giant fighting robots are cool. Of course they are. It's about transparency, isn't it?
Yeah.
And managing expectations.
Especially when their own website, robowar.com, explicitly says you can see real robots right here. That's a direct quote.
Right, that's a specific promise.
And if what people are actually seeing in the main arena is more like a stunt show, people in suits with added effects, that feels like it lets people down.
Lets the audience down, definitely.
And maybe it even does a disservice to the actual field of combat robotics, which is genuinely progressing, making amazing strides.
That's a great point. We're living in this incredible time where technology is catching up to science fiction. We have real robot fighting leagues. The tech is evolving fast.
So staging something less than real feels kind of pointless, like you said, unnecessary.
Yeah, like lip syncing when you can actually sing, why pretend? So here's something to think about for you listening. In this age where it's getting harder to tell entertainment from real technological breakthroughs, what's the responsibility here? How much transparency Do creators owe the audience about what's real and what's just spectacle?
And maybe more importantly, how does blurring that line affect how you perceive what robotics can actually achieve? Does it raise expectations unrealistically, or does it just make genuine progress seem less impressive?
Something definitely worth mulling over. That's our deep dive for today.